And so what can we learn, for our waiting rooms? Like, it's not just the stuff you put in it, but it's the feeling that it evokes, whether it's a sense of calm, whether it's, something to help distract you, whether it's like the cleanliness, like what is the message that you're trying to get across for your brand? And how can you get that message across without saying it? And that's what the waiting room gives you a chance to do. And then it gives you, on top of it, then you have the opportunities to market to people. But how can you market to them even without saying it? Hey there, welcome to the Dr. Marketing Tips Show. I am Jennifer.
And I'm Corey.
And today we're talking about an often overlooked but super valuable piece of your patient experience and, kind of part of your marketing experience or your marketing strategy. That is your waiting room. We're going to cover what your waiting room or your patient-facing rooms say about your brand, how long patients are really waiting, and what you can do to turn that downtime where the patients are spending time in the rooms while they're waiting on the docs, what you can do to turn that into kind of a marketing win, and what maybe you should avoid.
Yeah, I mean, this goes without saying, but your waiting room is kind of the first impression. So somebody walks in the door, maybe they check in, and then they go and they sit. And, data shows that 97% of patients spent time in a waiting room, and an average was about 14 minutes that they're in there. So, that may depend on whatever your practice is, of course, but I think the thing to know there is that if they're in that room for more than 30 seconds, which most of the time they are, that's an opportunity to reinforce the brand of your practice, to educate them, and to promote some other things. I can't tell you how many times I hear from practices that say, like, yeah, we have patients that come in and they don't even know half of the stuff we do. And my response to them is always, well, duh, like, because like I always go back to an ENT group that we worked with, and they have all these wonderful services. They had a like balance department and all this great stuff. But if I'm coming in because my ear is bothering me, I only care about that. I don't care that you can do balloon sinuplasty. Like, that's not on my radar. I want to come in, get the thing, and then leave. And when I walk into their waiting room, and Jen, I don't remember the client that I'm referring to here, but I walk into their waiting room, there was no TVs, no education. There was doctor bio cards, but I'm not going to go and pick up 14 different bio cards to see what they do. It's just not realistic. And then when you went into the exam room, there was a poster of like the anatomy of an ear, but then they would wonder why people didn't know they could do all these other different things.
Yeah, I remember the client very clearly. And it's always like a constant conversation point. And I feel as if, and I get it, like we can only think about so many things, but I feel like sometimes the aesthetic or the reasoning behind the way we design lobbies or waiting areas or patient facing areas, it's kind of an afterthought. And it is in many cases, especially when healthcare groups are like moving into an existing space and they don't have the budget and the wherewithal to think through some of it, of how that flow is going to work. Like I don't know why, I was listening to a podcast the other day, and it was talking about like, it was like a marketing type of podcast, and it was talking about like the psychology behind restaurant design, specific to like, like example, like they were saying like Planet Hollywood, if you remember Planet Hollywood back in the day, or Rainforest Cafe. And they wanted quick turnover in those restaurants. Like they only wanted you there for about 40 minutes because that was how long it took you to get a meal. So they made it highly stimulating, like overwhelmingly stimulating, so that you would come back again. But then they set it up so that the kids would enjoy it. And like at Rainforest Cafe specifically, they wanted it to be like that thunder that would come in, like that you'd only hear the thunder twice, because by the third time it gets annoying and you should be out of there, because it was meant to turn over tables. And it kind of got me to thinking, like, what is the message that we're sending in these waiting rooms, especially when they're an afterthought? Like another example they gave is restaurants that are more expensive, that are thinking that they want to create like a nook where you feel like it's an event. They will spend extra money on like intimate lighting. So they'll make it darker and they'll put intimate lighting at your table so that you're forced to lean into the conversation. So how did
Interesting.
like tricks like this translate to healthcare? I don't know, but like there's got to be some things that we can do to take what they're doing in the restaurants and make it work in the healthcare environment.
Yeah, that's a really interesting point because that does create a very specific ambiance and which just lends itself kind of to an experience. Whereas if you walk into a practice, for example, and there's, it's cluttered and there's like old magazines kind of like scattered about and some brochures that are like haphazardly placed and old like Starbucks cups on the counters and things like it has that same effect. It still creates this impression and this ambiance. You're just creating the wrong one. So yeah, I think it's important to kind of consider like what does the waiting room say about you? And I remember for an office that we helped open, we talked a lot about the actual like the front desk, like physically the construction of the front desk because it was open and it was floating and it was modern and which is great, but then there's a waiting room directly behind it. And so you've got two people up there typically to kind of, get patients in and direct them to the right areas and whatnot. But then there's a waiting room directly behind them. And right behind them in that small little waiting room space, there's a TV. The TV is always on like home and garden or, like one of those type of channels. Um, and then the space around it, there's a couple of tables. Everything is always kind of cluttered, and it's easier said than done. But when I put myself in the shoes of a patient and I'm thinking through the patient experience, yeah, when I walk in, I've got this nice little like waterfall thing on the left, got the bio cards for the docs, which is cool. I've got this nice like floating desk. There's someone there with a friendly face to help me, assuming they're not, like gossiping with the person next to them, which happens. But I walk in and I have this great first impression. And then if I go to that waiting room right behind them, it's like, oh, well, now I've seen behind the curtain and everything's kind of messy, like almost immediately. So it's one of those things where you have to kind of walk the walk and talk the talk. And it can't just be, oh, we built this to be a really welcoming space, which is great. And you should. But then the second part is like, well, what's actually behind that? And are you taking advantage of this space? Like, are you making the patients feel welcome? And does that space kind of match your values in terms of, like if you want to say you're like a minimally invasive provider, well, then it doesn't make sense to have stuff everywhere because that doesn't really apply to like the minimalism, right? Like you think if you are a specialty surgeon and you're focused on minimally invasive, you're going to have a really white, clean, modern, professional waiting room because that aligns with your brand and it sort of, subconsciously builds this trust. Whereas if it's all messy and all over the place, you could open yourself to patients thinking they can't even keep their waiting room clean. How is he going to keep my, the debris out of my spine or whatever?
It's true because I remember a client way back when it was pulmonology group, and you went in and the waiting room was clean, but there was dust. And there was dust, which tells me not a lot of people go through there. And it just, it was like my grandmother's house. Like it was just, and there's so many practices where they haven't been able to modernize yet. And what a difference, like it makes when you modernize. Or like, during COVID, so many practices cleared out the waiting rooms, like
Mhm.
completely cleared them out, took everything out so that it's just, and it's now it feels sterile in a lot of the waiting rooms, like because they haven't replaced it. Like there's definitely something to learn from other industries to make people feel more comfortable and more engaged. Even like scent, like what does it smell like? If you learn from the hotels, man, like we live in Orlando, so we're like the hotel capital, us in Vegas. When you walk into a major hotel brand, it smells amazing. Like you're like,
Mhm.
this smells so good. I want to go like buy, a cocktail and like a cinnamon bun because it smells so good in here. Like I got to go get my bathing suit on and go out to the pool because it smells like the tropics.
Right. Yeah, I want the candle of this so I can take it home.
Yes,
Yeah.
yeah. And so what can we learn, for our waiting rooms? Like it's not just the stuff you put in it, but it's the feeling that it evokes, whether it's a sense of calm, whether it's, something to help distract you, whether it's like the cleanliness, like what is the message that you're trying to get across for your brand? And how can you get that message across without saying it? And that's what the waiting room gives you a chance to do. And then it gives you on top of it, then you have the opportunities to market to people. But how can you market to them even without saying anything? And that's kind of what I'm getting at. It's like other industries, they've got this right. We don't have to reinvent the wheel. It's an easy thing that we could do if we start paying attention to it.
Yeah, so what I'm hearing is there's obviously like an aesthetic piece that kind of creates that impression. And then on top of that, there's the opportunity to actually market. So, that can be like I mentioned in my example, the one practice that always has like home and garden on in the background, which I'm assuming the front desk advocates for that because they don't want to hear the same looping messages over and over again. But as a patient, like we talked about at the top, I'm in there for 14 minutes. So if you've got a 25, 35-minute loop, assuming I'm not on my phone, but I glance up and then I have the opportunity to look at that loop and see some of the other specialties that you offer, or the fact that maybe you have a walk-in location I didn't know about, or there's a new provider, new service that just came out, like that's a great place because I'm captive in the practice. I'm clearly already a patient, so I at least halfway like you. But I just maybe don't know all of the other things that are available to me. So I think using that screen real estate is a huge missed opportunity in a lot of circumstances, as well as clear communication on how to schedule or review your experience or follow online, or kind of like just take that next step to help me become an advocate for the practice. If I have good service, what do I do about that? And again, I go back to the idea of like the TV or the digital display with health tips or service line promos, whatever it is. I think my dentist actually used to do a good job of this, but they've switched. And again, I wonder if it's due to some complaints from the team, but they used to have a loop up there, and they would show like before and after of Invisalign, and it's like some of the other services that they wanted to promote, tips and like funny teeth facts and things like that. Now it's just last time I went in there, it was just the news, and so which is fine, but I can get the news anywhere, kind of thing, and so it's just a missed opportunity. And there's even some stats that say that 44% of patients watch this health messaging in the waiting rooms. So sure, some people are going to glance at their phone or be glued to their phone even, but some people are going to look up, and those are captive eyes you have an opportunity to market to.
When it comes to lobby videos, I have this one client that I'm back and forth with constantly because, you know, you hear from them like the changing to lobby videos instead of TV was the best thing we ever did. But at the same time, they will say, you've got to turn the sound off on the lobby videos. I don't want any sound. I just want you to cross promote my other services while people are in there. And we know people are kind of in their phones.
Yeah.
They're not necessarily looking up. And I go back to, why would you not use the lobby videos to really showcase the practice, the things that you're doing in the community, maybe just some trivia like related to the practice, just stuff like that to engage. But because they get complaints from their front desk staff that they're hearing the same thing, or because the doctor is walking through and they're seeing the same thing, they're like, it doesn't work. It's too redundant. I want you just to turn off all of the volume. And, it's this constant dichotomy back and forth about like, we need to use the lobby videos are a great tool they're basically free to market to our patients that are sitting in there. And just because you're seeing the same thing, the patients are not seeing the same thing.
Right, because they're only in there for 15 minutes, ideally.
They're supposed to be, yes.
Right.
So, it's this constant thing. Maybe I'm a little jaded because I've been fighting about these lobby videos in this one practice because it's so good because they have people sitting in there. But the point is like there's so many opportunities in the office that you're not taking advantage of. When I was in government years ago, I would always get requests for signs, and it really like started getting me paying attention to signage and like Sometimes when you have too much stimulus, you don't see anything. And so like, you know, if you want people to see something, you have to be really selective in what you're putting out. Because I have a client who's like, I want this at checkout, this at check-in. I want everything on this page. I want everything up in this lobby video. And then all of a sudden it's clutter
It's
and
noise.
it's
It's just
creating
noise.
it's noise and nobody's seeing anything. And then goes back to the restaurant model. If you're trying to like get people moved through the system quick and you want them to feel like this is like get them in, get them out type of thing, then put a lot of noise in there. But if you're trying to make it where people feel like it's about them and about their patient experience, then maybe think of it more like a spa setting or a setting that's not going to overstimulate them across the board.
Absolutely. Yeah. And just to wrap up, I think, one thing that's often overlooked, but super easy to do is like set time on your calendar once every 30 or 60 days to walk the waiting room or walk into an exam room and see what's in there. Because oftentimes everybody gets busy and then you forget to do that. And then that's how old things show up, or you don't realize a mess, or maybe, next time you're walking through, you can spark that idea that leads to the opportunity to market or better connect with your patients. And put time on your calendar so you actually like plan for this and don't just say, oh yeah, I'll get to that when I get to it. Be intentional about it.
I totally agree. And I think like a big takeaway for me is as you are out and about, don't just look at what healthcare is doing, look at what other industries are doing and be thinking about how you might do something like that for your practice. Because that's where like this topic came from is I started looking at the psychology behind restaurant design. And it just led me to there's got to be a better way and little tidbits that we can take from that industry to make it work in our waiting rooms and in our patient facing rooms.
Yep, exactly. The waiting room is more than just a space to put people. It can be a marketing partner for you when it's done right.
That's right. That's right. So with that, I'm Jennifer,
I'm Corey.
and we'll see you next time on the Dr. Marketing Tips Show. See you soon.
Bye, guys.
If you want more like this, hit like and subscribe so you'll always be alerted to new episodes when they come out. And if you want information about us, visit us over at insightmg.com. That's insightmg.com. We'll see you on the next episode.